Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's Common Ground. I'm Ty Cooper, a production and events assistant here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation on A.I.R Gallery with Susan B., Christian Camacho-Light, Roxana Fabius, Kat Griefen, Maxine Henryson, JoAnne McFarland, Joan Snitzer, and Jessica Holmes. We're thrilled to have JoAnne McFarland doubling as our Poet Laureate of the Day to close today's program. A few quick notes before we get started. The Rail team will be helping out with tech if you have any questions. Closed captions are available by pressing the live transcript button at the bottom of the screen. We've started all of our events with two important acknowledgements. The first is that here in New York, we are on the Nape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. The second is acknowledgement that Black Lives Matter. The heart of both of these acknowledgements is a commitment to the liberation of the oppressed and solidarity for all who struggle for freedom, in recognition that when it comes to liberation, our histories never unfold in isolation, as said by the great Angela Davis. In that spirit, I encourage you all to check out the chat in just a moment for a living document of resources and actions. And now to introduce today's guests and host. Susan B. is an artist, editor, and A.I.R member living in Brooklyn. Christian Camacho-Light is a New York-based curator and writer whose research deals with matters of difference and identity, recognition and resistance, and the relationship between aesthetic and social representation. They are the director of exhibitions and fellowship at A.I.R Gallery. Roxana Fabius Rosenbaum is an Uruguayan curator and arts administrator. She currently lives and works in New York City and serves as executive director at A.I.R Gallery. Kat Griefen runs the Gallery and Museum Studies program at Queensborough Community College and is a faculty member for the Museum Studies MA with the CUNY School of Professional Studies. She was the director of A.I.R Gallery for 5 years and is presently the co-owner of Acla Griefen Fine Art. Maxine Henryson is a photographer and bookmaker living in New York City. A member of A.I.R since 2012, she is currently co-chair of the A.I.R Fellowship program along with Aphrodite Nabab and is a member of the A.I.R Executive Committee. JoAnne McFarland is an artist, poet, and curator. She is artistic director of Art Poetica Project Space in Gowanus, Brooklyn. Joan Snitzer is an artist and professor who has been affiliated with A.I.R Gallery since 1974. She is the co-chair and director of the Visual Arts Program in the Department of Art History at Barnard College. And finally, our host for the day, Jessica Holmes, is a New York area-based writer. She is the editor of the Brooklyn Rail's Art Tonic column and contributes regularly to the magazine, among other publications. Jess, take it away.
Hi, thank you, Ty, for that wonderful welcome, and thank you to everybody who's joining us today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with a robust roster of panelists. Before we get into it, I just, since there are so many of us who will be contributing today, I thought I'd let everybody take a moment and just speak for a minute or two about their history with A.I.R Gallery and their affiliation with it. And on that note, I thought I'd just jump in and sort of call you one by one. Joan, would you like to introduce yourself to our guests?
I'm Joan, and I started with the gallery as a student intern in 1974 after I was threatened by a male professor in art school about doing abstract art because he believed that women did representational art and men could do abstract art. And when I found A.I.R Gallery, I walked in the door and I never wanted to leave. And in effect, I've never left. So I became the first, what was then called a coordinator, that was not a director. And I stayed with the gallery till 1979. Left, came back on the advisory board, left and came back as a New York member artist for the last 10 years.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joan.
Okay.
Susan.
Yeah, so my history goes back actually to meeting Joan in graduate school at Hunter. And so that was 1975. I was getting my MA at Hunter. And we had an all-male faculty, and they really didn't like what I did. My work was very colorful and painterly and feminist, you know, because I had gone to Barnard. So Joan suggested I go to some meetings at A.I.R. And so I was still a student when I met like Nancy Spiro, Mary Beth Edelson, you know, Anna Mangetta, all these people that were so like heroines to me. So it was a great experience. And then I showed for a while in some commercial galleries. And in 1996, I joined the gallery. So I've been there 25 years. Meanwhile, showing other places also, but it's just been a steadying force. It's great to be part of a community of women. I've served on the executive committee, the membership committee, editing grants. I've done every which thing, including sitting at the gallery, which we used to have to do every week or every month. So I'd say it's been a really, it's been a great experience to meet all these different women and to see the different generations of women, and also the fellowship, you know, which somebody else will talk about later. But so I've had 9 solo shows, I should say, at the gallery.
Amazing. Thank you, Susan. JoAnne.
Hi, I'm really just so happy to be part of this. And I can say that my experience with A.I.R. began in the late 90s. I had 2 shows there in Gallery 2, in the Gallery 2 program. And I can still remember Regina setting up her show in Gallery 1 with the help of her husband, Martin. That memory just really lives in my mind. It was a wonderful experience. After the second show, the New York members invited me to be part of the membership. And I felt really honored that that happened. And I was really excited to be part of that community. And it was exciting with lots of ups and downs. And it gave me this wonderful opportunity to show my work in a really strong community. So I love that. I left the gallery in 2010, but I returned in 2013 as the interim executive director. And I'm really, really so grateful to the director before me, who preceded me directly, that was Judy Lonis, for really preparing me for success. She did everything that she could to help me to really be a dynamic presence in the gallery and to follow her. So after that trial period, I became the exhibitions director, and I was there from 2014 through 2015. And it was kind of like a golden moment for the gallery. We were just had such, it was a pivotal moment. And I had some other artists in particular that I was working with, Jane Swavely, Jacqueline Ferrante, and Rachel Farmer. And we still talk about how exciting and wonderful that was, and how we really felt that we were doing some important work at the gallery. So that's some of my experience there. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, we'll turn it over to Kat.
So I love what both of you said. I think because Dina Muller was the director before I was. I started in 2006. I was there 5 years till 2011. And she was incredible. It continues to be an incredible colleague and very generous with her time in terms of preparing me. I was not particularly as prepared as I probably should have been, but Susan B. was the person I knew who was a wonderful advocate and was certain, even though I wasn't, that I would be a good fit. I came with a background in women's studies and in art history, and mostly experience, not so much in the art field, though I have lots now, but working as an organizer. So bringing that kind of experience of facilitation and political activism to the organization, which actually I think a lot of members have had over the years, including and also some of the staff. So that's an interesting inflection, I think, for many years. So just some key things when I was there. 2007 was a big year just in general for feminist art. The Sackler Center was opening, the WAC, Women, Art and Revolution, that Connie Butler had curated, was traveling. Elle at Centre Pompidou was in the plans, that's Centre Pompidou. And so there was a lot of activity. At the same time then, or shortly after in 2008, we relocated Dina Muller had moved the gallery, which had been in Soho all the early years in the 2000s, to Chelsea, which was where everyone was going, and she was definitely ahead of the game, as A.I.R. always was. But then Chelsea became unsustainable, so in 2008 we moved for the first time out of New York, out of Manhattan, to Dumbo, which the gallery is located in a different location, but still in Dumbo currently. And so we did a major exhibition at NYU and at A.I.R. over many months about the gallery's history at that time, co-curated by myself, Dina Muller, and Carrie Lovelace. And I want to just recognize that the Fales Library and Special Collections at NYU supported that. The archives are there still, and they've done a lot of support, especially Marvin Taylor, to support the work that A.I.R. does over the years. We'll get into a lot of these other things later. The gallery did its first art fairs in that period, because the gallery does sell artwork, even though it's not for profit. So that was new and interesting things. Yeah, and I just want to also recognize another person who's a couple other people who aren't here, Barbara Zucker and Susan Williams, the two original founders, without whom none of us would be here today. All of the original members, and also some of the recent members and current members, such as Jane Swavely, who've really helped sustain the gallery in the recent decades. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kat. And Roxana and Christian, would you like to introduce yourselves as well?
Yeah, but chronologically, Maxine is before us.
Oh, my apologies, Maxine. Yes, please.
That's fine. Hi. So I first was introduced to the idea of being a member at A.I.R. by Catherine Mosley. I was teaching at Bennington College, and Catherine was a member, and she urged me to apply. So I did, and so I became a member of A.I.R. in 2012. I'm a relatively new member, but almost immediately I started working on the becoming chair of the fellowship program, which I'm continued to this day, and now at this point I'm co-chairing with Aphrodite Nabab, and I work very closely with Christian, and I think we'll probably get into that later. That's my introduction to A.I.R.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maxine. And now Roxana and Christian.
Yes.
Please.
So I'm Roxana. I'm the current executive director of A.I.R. This week, actually, 2 days ago, I celebrated my 5th anniversary with the gallery on the 24th of August.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an intense period and very fruitful and exciting. My relationship with A.I.R. Of course began by studying it historically through books and letters and archives, but became in person when a friend of mine, Amber Seiba, was a curatorial fellow at A.I.R. And she's the one that introduced me to this community. And similar to what other people said, the person that welcomed me and really insisted in me becoming part of it was Jane Swavely, who was the president of the executive committee at the time. Yeah.
Go. I'm Christian Camacho-Light. I'm the director of exhibitions and fellowship at the gallery. I began officially working with the gallery in October of this last year, but I've been an audience member and collaborator for probably about 5 years now.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so excited that we have the full breadth of the gallery's history here on the panel today. I think we'll be able to cover all sorts of nooks and crannies. So we thought to get started that we begin with a brief clip from a documentary that was made in 2008 by Meredith Drum to celebrate the history of A.I.R. gallery. And in this clip, you'll see some archival footage, and we thought we'd show this and then sort of begin diving in, talking about the gallery's history.
I think that the feeling has grown, and I know in my mind it feels like sort of, if I can be so bold to say, sort of a historical event. The fact that this is the first women's gallery.
Well, the idea was Barbara Zucker's and Susan Williams. They were talking about how difficult it was to get into galleries. You know, they both had been trying and they both had been rejected. And they decided it would be great to have a gallery of all women.
And that we wanted to dispel the onus that a bunch of women showing together don't make a strong showing, which we knew was a lot of crap.
You know, there was something that Lucy Lepard had started, which was something called a slide registry, which was at that time because no women had any, there were almost no women that had galleries at all, anywhere. And there was even a feeling that women couldn't even make art. It was a huge question. And so to kind of combat that, Lucy Lepard was in a group called the Ad Hoc Women Artists of the Art Workers Coalition, and they started what was like this huge innovation at that time, which was just to collect slides of women and their work.
Also at that time there was a nucleus group of 6 women which formed kind of word of mouth, half Lucy Lepard, half Joyce Kozlov, half registry, Women Artists Registry, and out of the nucleus of 6 formed a committee of 4, and that was Dottie Addy, Mary Gregoriadis, Susan, and myself, and we looked at many artists, out of which has formed ultimately the group of 20 women.
This tape was made during and shortly after the original opening of A.I.R. Gallery in the fall of 1972.
At the beginning of A.I.R., I know that there were a lot of meetings, and it had a lot of the tumultuous, fiery discussion that a lot of the women's groups had at that time, and so they were trying to figure out what the name was, and they came up with A.I.R., which I think Paradina Pindell came up with because it reminded her of Jane Eyre.
A.I.R. standing for Artist in Residence, and it's just a very symbolic gesture about taking over uninhabitable space and making it your own, and it was sort of this feminist action within a male-dominated art world. There's an articulation in the founding documentation around the feeling that the only way that a woman artist could get an opportunity to show work in New York is if their work was derivative of successful male artists' work, and that this feeling that what they were really making, what they were really focused on, was less interesting to the art world and to most dealers and collectors. So to have a space where they were their own curators and they could show exactly what they were working on in the studio was this incredible opportunity, and there's this amazing explosion of creativity that comes out of it, work that no one had seen before because it didn't have any other venue.
Looking back at
So, you know, watching this film, I'm really struck by the archival footage because I feel that the energy and the excitement and passion of these very early days at A.I.R. is really palpable. So I wonder if I could begin speaking with you all about, you know, the initial foundation of the gallery, how it came about, and you know, some of the early issues that cropped up and how they were resolved. Is there someone that would like to jump in on that?
I will, yeah. So I wasn't there the first 2 years, but I did come in. And I think I even included a slide of one of the Monday night programs with Lucy Lepard speaking in the center. It was a really energetic space, and it was really radical for its time. There wasn't anything like it, and it was a time of change where counterculture was beginning, but it hadn't changed yet. And what's remarkable is when you look back at these women and the slides that are even in this presentation, just how radical they and their work actually was. It was, you know, it doesn't look so radical in today's context, but in 1972, it was completely off the charts. And it was experimental, it was free, it was risk-taking, and it was supported by the group. And I think that kind of community and collective is really important now. Oh, this is a list, right? This I put together because the context in which the gallery was founded had this as a social structure. And I think you can see a woman couldn't have a credit card in her own name. She couldn't be guaranteed she would not lose her job because of getting pregnant. A woman could not serve on a jury. She could not fight in the front lines. She could not take any kind of legal action against workplace sexual harassment. She couldn't take legal action against spousal rape. She couldn't get health insurance on her own or at the same rate as a man. And she couldn't have a legal abortion. I think if we think about today's context, if we had to face these kinds of social constraints and then make art as women, it would feel very different.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm really glad that you opened with this because it really situates the, the time and place that the gallery came into existence. And these are so many things that, generations later we take for granted, but it wasn't really that long ago.
Yeah. I mean, if I may add something, it's really transparent in the archives how unprecedented this was. That the certificate of incorporation for a nonprofit, the 501c3 certificate, is addressed "Dear Gentlemen." The first grant that helped the funding of the gallery, that was major in enabling the founding members group to have this Monday nights programs, was also addressed "Dear Gentlemen." It was, I guess, impossible for funders, for business, or the bureaucracy to comprehend that a group of women will be doing this. So that's something that we can see how different it was at the time.
Absolutely. I think Nancy Spiro described the opening as the shot heard round the world, because there were letters in that archive, along with what Roxana is discussing, in like many, many different languages, internationally, coming in from groups of women saying, like, is this real? Is this really happening? We've heard this rumor, what are you doing? How do we replicate this? And then you have what Roxana said, and these letters and questions, people saying like, but can women really paint? Can women really make art? We can laugh at now.
I think one more thing I would add is that A.I.R. is a cooperative gallery. And of course, in the 50s, there was on 10th Street cooperative galleries, but which women showed at, but they were always like the minor people in those galleries. So even though there was a downtown art scene that included women, there was never a place where women's work was put forward. And I think really coming out of the feminist movement in 1968, there was a real need for a place of our own, I would say. And I think that A.I.R. has served that function and has brought, there's over hundreds of women that have been involved with the gallery since it started. It's actually when you look at the huge roster of people who have been involved, because some people just stayed for a little while, they went on to commercial galleries, they died, whatever, they left art. But it's still a very impressive roster of talent, I think.
Yes, Susan, you bring up a good point about the gallery's organizational structure, and I wonder if some of you could elaborate on that a little bit and what made it so radical at the time and continues to do.
When I was at Hunter, I wrote about the structure for my master's thesis. And one of the things I found, I'm curious to see what others think about this hypothesis, that the mixed model is what makes A.I.R. both sustainable and kind of fights itself internally in a funny way, because it is a not-for-profit. Artwork is sold through A.I.R., so it's not commercial, but artwork is sold. It's obviously an alternative, incredible alternative space and like community space. And it's a feminist organization. And so the goals of feminist organizations, not-for-profits, commercial spaces, alternative spaces are somewhat different, but that also means that the funding model has been mixed too. So that has made it sustainable. So this kind of mixed structure, I think, is really, really interesting to consider.
I agree with you, Kat. I think its original formation as a collective where all members and parts were equal was really admirable. A big portion of that is once you were accepted as a member, nobody could tell you what to show or how to show it. There was a complete freedom, and I don't think that exists in any other kind of organization or in any organization. And that still is held, that once you're scheduled for an exhibition, it's your exhibition. Period. Nobody says that won't sell or it will sell or it's not good or it is good. It's your space. And that kind of risk taking and that kind of support is really important. And through the years, there has been an ebb and flow to become more corporate, that women could compete financially if it had a sales force, if it did certain things that promoted their work. And actually, it keeps swinging back to this full risk-taking freedom. So you're right, it's been ebbing and flowing between a few models, but its existence came about because it's truly a collective force. Not always agreeing, but collective.
Yeah, and there's a point that Daria Dorosh, who's one of the founding members, just typed in the chat that the New York Artists members are actually the board of directors of the organization. And what that means ownership over the corporation, and the staff we help. But that's a particularly important difference in terms of responsibility and labor that they give towards the community. In the initial years, that labor meant, renovate, like the image that Joan has behind her, renovating the space and doing everything with their own hands, gallery sitting, and today serving in different committees, supporting the artists that are part of A.I.R, supporting each other, fundraising, all the levels of activity of a nonprofit on top of their own practices. So that also translates as part of feminist practice. It's not the feminist practice of A.I.R is not only necessarily what's on the walls and in the shows, but also how people work together and how it expands to the larger community. And that's an important point, I think.
Yes, JoAnne, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that particular point and really addressing what Kat said, in that the fact that the artists are contributing so equally to the running of the institution is an uneasy thing, because they have to be vulnerable in a certain kind of way. They don't have the kind of shield that a commercial gallery can provide, where the commercial gallery is being an advocate for the artists, and for that they get paid. So there's a way in which, once the gallery decides that it is an alternative space, that structure is a way for the artist to really embrace that. And that sometimes, takes a little bit of work, but I do think that it has enabled the gallery to survive when other structures have failed.
I'm glad you're putting up this image of the Monday night programs, because I think this is another way that A.I.R was really innovating at the time. Now it's so typical for not-for-profits, arts organizations to offer professional development programming for artists. There are organizations that is all that they do. But at the time when the Monday night program started, this was not the case. There was not like hundreds of places you could go as an artist to learn about how to do your taxes, how to, you know, work with particular types of clay, you know, but this, how to create a film. But A.I.R.'s programming that was all done by, you know, people who are part of the larger A.I.R. community. When you look at the list of people who contributed, all the major curators were hosting programs, all the major art critics, everyone was coming either on a panel or to what we call Skillshare now, maybe. So I think of A.I.R. as one of really the original innovators for like artist services programs. And these were not just open to women, though they were largely attended by women. They were open to other artists as well.
And I think I learned so much by going to these Monday night series. I mean, it was such an education. Even hearing my teacher from Hunter, Rosalind Krauss, say she wasn't a feminist, which I was kind of clear about anyway in her class. But, you know, everybody was out there, you know, it was very active and it was very lively and people asked questions and it was really a learning, you know, it was kind of a learning space that it still remains true. I think it's still true now. We have a reading group and we still do a lot of activities. But as Kat said, I think it was very unusual at that time to have a group of women that were so active in wanting to talk about issues and wanting to get together to talk about issues. And I found it very powerful. As this is as a young student, you know, but coming into seeing how women could put this together, it was very, very important.
Yeah, and if I could add to that in terms of the discourse of the time, there was a real shift in discourse at A.I.R. on those programs, talking about sex work, talking about motherhood, all these things that didn't have a home before or had multiple homes, but were not unified in one place. I mean, I'm sure Joan and Susan can talk about that.
Yeah, this is actually Lucy Lippard facing us in the center. She's on the panel on that night. And it was about this time in her career that she shifted to writing completely about women and becoming, you know, an advocate for feminist art herself. And as you can see in the photo, these Monday night groups were very well attended. People sat on the floor, crowded in, and there was always a standing room only audience. It was the only game in town.
So it sounds like there was a real grounding right from the start in community and building a community within the gallery. Is that something that has perpetuated?
Sure. I mean, I can answer that. I think you can say for sure that it's even expanded because of the internet. Of course, there was no internet back then and we had no website and everything was done in person. You know, like if you wanted to get to join, I actually applied 3 times for membership and was turned down twice, but everything was done by letter. It was done in person. It was very slow in a way. And now, of course, with the internet and being able to reach people all over, we've done a whole series for China this year, which was, I think, a fantastic thing. Being able to reach out beyond that, or, you know, this is the original thing, is that we are all sitting on the floor together. Well, now we're sitting on a global floor and the whole situation has expanded. So I think we're still following up with the same fervor of the original members. I mean, I hope so.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Maxine, maybe you want to talk about the Baturu program that you organize and how it relates to community. You're muted.
You need to unmute.
Sorry, I was one of the people that organized the series of lectures, and in particular, the series that I put together was 10 different lectures, and each lecture was done either by a New York member or a team, 2 people working together to do a lecture, and the lectures dealt with issues that related to the individual's personal work, but also to the larger community. And I think that we had fabulous attendance from with our online presentations every Monday morning. And I think also that it was a situation that, once again, frequently, I think the community aspect of A.I.R. is when people are working together, either on committees or in this case on presenting lectures, because there was a lot of back and forth between the people giving the lectures and myself. We, among other things, had to learn the technology to be able to do it, which was sometimes challenging. But also, like, for example, as I work primarily with the fellowship program, there are committees, and every member has to be a member of 2 committees. And it's frequently when you're working together that you bond. And like Jane Swayville and I did the executive committee along with Susan Stamen for 9 years. And so there's aspects of it's not just about your work. It's also, like Roxana said, it really is your feminist practice. And this is a very strong point for me, that I feel it's really important for young women artists to have the support that we're able to give them in the fellowship. And Christian is just fabulous. Has just been with us for a year, but has been really, really terrific. And I think that, like the fellows that I've worked with over the past 8 years, I'm still in touch with them. So in that sense, the community is beyond just the New York members. It's also extended to, for example, there's 6 fellows every year. I think I'm past my 2 minutes.
Oh, that's okay. Christian, would you like to add anything to Maxine's remarks on that?
Sure, yeah, I can talk, maybe give like a brief explainer on the fellowship program and what we do. So like Maxine said, 6 artists are awarded with the fellowship each year. It's a year-long fellowship. The program itself was founded in 1993 by artist member Stephanie Bernheim, specifically to provide emerging and underrepresented artists in New York City with an opportunity to get professional development support, be mentored, and have a solo exhibition. So in the program over the last 28 years, for instance, more than 100 artists have had the opportunity to have their first solo exhibition ever in New York City with the support of the A.I.R. community. Still today, the year of the fellowship, we hold structured professional development workshops in the fall, press release writing, artist statement writing, exhibition planning, and then the fellows hold their exhibitions typically in the spring. We're really excited now, for instance, we're opening the next round, the upcoming season, fellowship applications for 2022 to 2023 next week. So if anyone's interested in the program, stay tuned either on our website, airgallery.org, or on Instagram.
Great. And that sort of brings us to, the key and central component, which is the art that was being made because of and exhibited at the gallery. We have a little scroll of images that perhaps we can, Malvika, we can go through, and some of you could talk a little bit about the artists that were working at the beginning and sort of going through the years, beginning here with Barbara Zucker, who was one of the founding members.
Well, Barbara was basically taking kitchen materials, pouring, mixing, and placing them on the floor. And that was her response to, welding, carving, and construction that the male counterparts were doing at the time. And this kind of installation was incredibly radical in 1972.
The next slide. Yeah.
I think this is self-explanatory. They're very small, maybe a few inches each. And it's a very private and sensual retake of old master's work. And she's kind of created her own stories. Very personal. I love this piece, also an answer to the male minimalist grid paintings. She actually made grids out of refrigerator components and had them freeze and created frost. It's so innovative now, I can't believe it. And it still looks crazy and fresh and dynamic, but it was amazing in 1973. I think this needs no explanation. She still keeps going and producing very strong and political work.
And I think what's so important to realize is that Judy Bernstein couldn't get this work shown anywhere.
Right.
And A.I.R. was the only place that it could be shown. And even at A.I.R., I think it was, in my sense of it at the time even, was that it was controversial among the members. Because it was so phallic and it was so sexual, but that was the kind of space that was enabled so that somebody like Judy Bernstein, who would not have gotten into any commercial gallery at that time, and now has a career and is now thriving. But a lot of women artists don't thrive until after they're over 70. So it's really, you see how radical this work was. I mean, nobody knew what to make of it at the time in 1973.
It was shown at A.I.R. and censored in Philadelphia the same year.
Yeah.
I just want to briefly say, when you think about also movements like A.I.R. art groups of artists, but individual artists also were innovating completely new genres. And this idea like earthworks, earth body works, especially earthworks that many people might think are mostly male artists. If you think of Agnes Denis, and then Anna Mendieta, Mary Beth Edelson, Rachel Bosco-Hain, you have this whole group of artists doing these incredible works, like again, like Susan said, or Jen said, so early. Oh, and I have to step in here because I'll be frank, as a commercial dealer now, I work with Mary Gregoriadis, and there's a real resurgence of interest in her work and in a whole nother genre, which is pattern decoration. She and Howardina Pindell would have been the artists at A.I.R. who are most closely associated with pattern decoration. There's an incredible exhibition at the Hessel that includes both of them. And so I think some of the more recent museum exhibitions are starting to look at A.I.R. and say, look what artists at A.I.R. were doing in this early period.
But I have to also add that a lot of times I feel like when these artists are finally recognized, their time at A.I.R. is not particularly put forward. So I think it's important to acknowledge the role that the gallery had in these, showing these works that they weren't able to be shown in a commercial space. And I think that's so different. I had that experience too, is also having shown in commercial spaces and not being allowed to show certain things by dealers, that when I got to the A.I.R., I could show whatever I wanted, which may or may not have been good for me, but it was just like this freedom that I think is very important to talk about.
Susan.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to know why you think that that's true. Why do you think that the A.I.R. experience is not emphasized for some of these artists?
I think because it's a nonprofit and a women's space, I think it's somewhat devalued. And a lot of people have moved on, they'd rather not think about where they came from. I think you see this, it's like, small press publications, when somebody becomes a big time author, if they go to Norton from like Litmus, they don't necessarily want to acknowledge their past. And I can even understand the impulse, but I think that's why in our hoping to do for our 50th anniversary, some kind of show that that emphasizes the range of works that started in 1972 to 2022.
I think Susan might have gotten at some of the main areas, but I do think we should recognize those artists who started and continue to support the gallery. So artists such as Judith Bernstein and Mary Beth Edelson, who passed this year when she was alive, and also Mary Gregoriadis, who over the years have continued to serve on an advisory board, donate works back, really insist on the emphasis of A.I.R. I think it's more artists such as Ana Mendieta, who's not had the opportunity to craft her own story, that her story is somehow usurped in various ways. And while she only in her lifetime had made solo shows at A.I.R, like it really was her only major venue, that with her story, that we don't see that until more recently because A.I.R and other folks insist upon it. Yeah. I wonder if, is Roxana, there was a great program that with Howardina recently, which I wonder if somebody wants to mention.
Sure, I can talk about that. We had a conversation with Howardina earlier this year in March as part of the launch of our new patron circle. And Howardina, I can't speak for her, but from the experience of talking to her, she has a particularly interesting relationship with A.I.R because of experiences of racism that she suffered during her time in the organization, but at the same time, she's a supporter of the organization and presented really pivotal works in her career in the space. So I think she really respects the intentions of A.I.R, and I'm happy that I had the chance to have conversations with her about the difficult, the good and the bad about her time at A.I.R and really her continued support. I mean, in 2021, counted with her support, and that was really great. And at the time that she had the show at the Shed, that mentioned the difficulties directing. I don't know who had the opportunity to see that show, but it was mentioned in her last video piece. You wanna add something?
And Nancy Spiro, who's been so important to the gallery as well.
I would like to comment on the fact that Nancy was sort of a mentor of mine, and she was just so supportive. She'd come to my studio and she would I can't tell you what it meant to know her and Leon Golub, who were these incredible political figures and political artists. And she ran the Monday night series, I believe, for quite a while. So I would always see her standing there, overseeing everything. And she was such a force. It was really remarkable to have any interactions with her. She was very, very opinionated and very strong. And I think that that's one of the, to me, she's a prototypical A.I.R artist in her work and also in her attitudes.
Nancy was also a mentor of mine, and I worked in her studio first uptown on 72nd Street, and then when she moved to Soho, and I installed most of these early shows, and she actually was my first studio visit when I was still a student. And she collected young artists from all over the world around her kitchen table. Anybody that came to New York and contacted her, she welcomed. And she is an inspiration of a truly generous, brilliant, and feminist artist.
And I also have to say that when Mira Shore and I started our magazine, Meaning, in 1986, she was like one of the first people to support us. Yeah. And she really, I came to her studio, she gave me a piece of writing that had never been published. And she was just this incredible force that I really miss. I really miss her because she was just so lively and alive in her presence. and there she is marching outside of the MoMA.
Just briefly, this was documented by Mary Beth Edelson, which I think I mentioned because there's a few, I think she was one of the many documentarians of A.I.R.'s history. And for those who want to know more, both A.I.R.'s archive, as we've mentioned, is at the Fales Library Special Collections, but also Mary Beth Edelson's, which includes so much more than her own work, but really some incredible documentation of the movements over feminist movements in New York over many, many decades.
I guess one thing I would add is that sometimes when you hear now that there's a lot of women and people of color being shown at museums, and it seems like the museums are just being very nice, that we were out there, I mean, I was out there on the streets protesting for years in front of the Whitney, in front of MoMA, in front of the Met. Nothing happened by accident. The Guerrilla Girls were very active. You know, there had to be a push, and A.I.R. was part of the push against the establishment that didn't want to acknowledge artists of color and women artists.
Pat came a little later, but she also is associated with pattern decoration and is included in the Hessel the exhibition at the Hessel that Anna Katz curated from Ellie Mocha that's traveling right now. And this work famously, actually, unfortunately, the Times covered in just maybe 2 years ago, was gifted to MoMA to celebrate MoMA's anniversary, which then went missing and is gone permanently. So it kind of speaks, unfortunately, to the status of works of women artists. Our understanding is it might have been treated as an actual cake instead of a sculpture, and thus is lost to history. Luckily, there's a lot of other really good work from this period that still exists. There's a really short piece I wrote on her relationship to A.I.R. In the Performa Women Artists Journal. There's so much that can be said, but I've said too much already.
Oh. You can go to the next slide, Malika.
It's very exciting that Kazuko's work was shown at Zucker Gallery this year. The work that she showed at A.I.R. in, I guess, 1980. And it was just great to see this work, which I actually hadn't seen in 1980, to see how vibrant and alive it seems now. And, you know, it's really remarkable work, I think, and very under-acknowledged up till recently.
I could say a lot here, but I'll just reference the fact that the Google Arts and Culture has a really incredible many-part exhibition based on her history. And actually A.I.R., Akola Griefen and David Lewis will host in November a memorial for Mary Beth Edelson, and we'll share more information about that soon, because she just passed, unfortunately, in this last year.
When was this one from?
I'm afraid I inserted this and I don't have a date. Do you know, Joan?
No, I think you did insert it. And I also noticed that Daria Dorish's work is missing in this group. Does somebody have a slide we can add? Because she was not only a founding member, but she's still a member. She's the only person that has actually been involved the entire 50 years. And I don't know where her slide went.
And she has an upcoming solo show at A.I.R. this year in October? September.
Opening September 10th.
That's great. Do you have something you can screen share of that show? I think it's important that she's acknowledged as there from the very beginning and still there. It's not in, I just went through. I think there were a lot of editors and we
I'm so sorry. Unfortunately, we don't have anything right now, but I think perhaps better than showing the work, we could pass the mic to Daria.
Oh, good. Yeah, that would be great.
Ty, are you able to do that?
1 minute, just listening into this wonderful conversation. And I don't have an image handy, but if you want to see what history looks like over 45 years, my show in September that Christian mentioned and Rox is a culmination of what it means to be an artist and think freely about the issues that drive your work. It's a very ambitious desire to link human, landscape, or planet and the cosmos, because we are in such a difficult moment right now for artists and for everyone else. So, you know, it's wonderful looking back at the history of the gallery, and should be very encouraging, all the great things that people have said today about community and getting together and trying to, you know, do something about our situation. But A.I.R. is a fantastic research space. I hope my sound is working from the country where my studio is. Thank you, Malvika. It's a fantastic space because we own our own direction and we can make it into anything we need to. And I think every artist deserves that right, and to decide whether they're going to go, you know, with the support from a commercial gallery or the support from their colleagues and their personal audience. So my work has been wandering through tons of issues that have culminated in the next show, looking at what it means to be human, what we've done to the planet, and then what our last hope is, which is really universal. It's the way patterns work in the universe. So thank you for this opportunity, Joan.
Great. Thank you, Daria. So glad you could be here with us as well.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk a little bit, since we've seen so much, well, a selection of the work that's been shown at the gallery across the years. Something that came up earlier this week when we were speaking, which I think is part and parcel of the gallery, is its many different physical iterations and its move across the city and the neighborhoods throughout the years. I know a couple of you had thoughts about that, and I wonder if that's something you'd like to say a little bit about now. Or not?
Joanne, do you wanna talk about the last move? Which was a big one, I
The
think.
last move. Well, thanks, Roxana. I can say a little bit about, I remember when the gallery was still in Chelsea. Now, it was in several places before that. So someone else can go a little further back. But when the gallery was in Chelsea, we were thinking that it might be a really great move to go to Brooklyn. And some people wanted to do that, and some people did not want to do that. But we ended up making that move. And the first location was on Front Street, 11 Front Street. And I was the director during the move from that space to Plymouth Street, where the gallery is now. And so I think that the space is wonderful. I mean, it's really terrific. And that area is growing so much. So hopefully the gallery will be there for a while. Roxana, you can speak more to that. I don't know if there's a new lease or what the plans are.
Yeah, we're staying here for the next 3 years. We hope longer, but yeah. I mean, Daria wrote a comment about how real estate drives New York, and it's really true. And Joanne, I mentioned you because the other day you were talking about how real estate defines programs as well in the gallery, like the way the galleries are constructed really like influences what's being done. And this, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but I can also mention something. It's really, right now we have 3 gallery spaces. One gallery space is dedicated to the fellowship exhibitions. And yeah, we hope to stay here for longer. But A.I.R. has been in, the original spaces were in Soho, then it moved to Chelsea, then 2 locations in Dumbo. So it
There
shifted with
there
the
were
current-
there were three locations in Soho. So the whole real estate thing is that every time you get settled one place, we seem to get pushed into another space. And then, it was, I believe, Wooster Street to Crosby Street to Wooster Street to Chelsea, and then to in Dumbo. And so it's really been an itinerant space. I'd like to see the slides of the current space, which I think are at the end of this slideshow. This is Barbara Siegel, who's in the center in the red shirt, and she died a few years ago, and there's a little retrospective of her work that's up right now.
Right.
So if you keep going along,
I think we have
it's
images
Barbara
of-
again in the middle of the group. And this is Barbara Siegel's retrospective, which is curated by two members of the gallery. And she's a wonderful artist, so I hope people can see this show.
This is up presently, right? Until when?
Yeah, yes, this is up at our space on Plymouth Street. And then there's two other shows, which are our fellows.
Yeah, maybe I can speak a little bit as well to the current exhibition. So like Susan mentioned, the exhibition Investigations, memorializing Barbara Siegel's work is on view in the first gallery, and galleries 2 and 3 are two 2020 to 2021 fellows, part of our fellowship program, Botany Griefen, whose exhibition is Untitled Inflatable House Zip Ties Blower, which you see here. And then gallery 3 is Sky Olsen, whose exhibition is The Invisible Hand. It's a film installation. And all 3 shows are on view through Sunday, September 5th. So definitely come and check them out if you're in the area. And then we'll open new exhibition September 10th. Daria's exhibition will open then. We'll also have shows with Mimi Orizki, who is a national member of the gallery, and our last fellow of the 2020 group, Destiny Belgrave.
And I think this is a good place to talk about the gallery in the present. It's on the eve of its 50th anniversary, as I understand. And I guess I'm interested in hearing from all of you about your thoughts about it here in the present day, in what way the gallery evolves or is continuing to evolve, and how you feel about its future, what you see for its future. Shall I start with JoAnne?
Joan? Joan or JoAnne?
I'll start with JoAnne. I'll mix it up a little bit.
Okay.
Oh, that's really interesting to talk about. Well, I'm involved in a fellowship right now with this organization that's associated with Dark Matter University. And Brian Lee, one of the founders of Dark Matter University, had this just brilliant thought that has really kept me going for the last few weeks, which is that for every injustice, there's an architecture that supports it. And so I think, especially following up our talk about where the gallery has been, my hope for A.I.R. would be that to really embrace the idea of being an alternative space, to really own that, and to look at all of the ways that the gallery can really pull away from some of the toxic elements in our culture and some of the issues that we have continued to have and are really exacerbated in this moment around gender and race specifically. And I think that part of the way we do that is in thinking about how galleries are changing at this point, that there's so much that we can do with technology. We have the walls themselves, but our relationship to those spaces is changing. And so I'm curious to see what can we do that will really address this fact. And I profoundly believe that this is true, that for every injustice, there's an architecture that supports it. So, what can the gallery do with the bricks and mortar space and with the programming that will really energetically address that? And I'm delighted, Roxana is director, very soon after my own tenure. And I just have been so reassured and encouraged and elated even that she has really developed some very dynamic program in concert in working with the members of the gallery. So in this moment, I'm feeling extremely hopeful.
Wonderful. Maxine, how do you feel?
Well, I think that, like I said, that there are various committees, and one, for example, one that has been really, we've been influential this past year is the Equity Committee, in which we have been looking at issues of race and gender and really trying to educate ourselves. And so we have readings and discussions, and sometimes people from the outside who know more than we do come in and talk to us. So I think along with what I have the same hopes that JoAnne does, that we're able to move forward in this regard. I think that we start to see it within the fellowship program, and we see who's applying for we generally get between 300 and 400 applicants for our program, but we're seeing, a much more diverse group are actually applying for the fellowships. So I think we're headed in the right direction. That's not to say it's not without its ups and downs, but I think that pretty much we're all on the same page of wanting to have a more expansive and more diverse group of fellows, of members and fellows.
Susan, where do you see the gallery?
Well, I think, I've been with it for so long, and it has changed. I mean, it changed. It's a dynamic organization. I mean, people die, they age out, they leave. And so there's always kind of a flow that happens. We have 22 members, but we also have, I don't remember how many national members from all over the country, and we have fellows. So there's a lot of different, there's about 90 people that are involved at any time. So I think what JoAnne and Maxine are pointing to is the need to expand our horizons as a space. And I think that's been an issue right from the start. I think it was pretty clear to those women who started the gallery that this was going to be it would be hard to have a diverse space with mostly white women. So, I'm just putting it out there. And over the years, it's been an issue. And, but I think it's being addressed there. And that I think that Christian and Roxana and the staff have really worked really hard to make it a more diverse and more welcoming space.
Mm-hmm. Joan, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to point something out, which is the initial gallery and community was in Soho, and there was in 1972 a handful of galleries that people took seriously. And so its competition wasn't large, and most of the members of that community, most of them lived within walking distance of the space. The rent was $125 a month, and the gallery dues was $25 a month. This made the existence of the gallery certainly financially very possible for just about anybody. That has changed enormously as the art industry has changed. And there's a lot of pressure now with corporate ecology going global and arts ecology being global for A.I.R.'s expansion, and to fund that kind of thing, the competition, and to remain independent and free is going to be the upcoming challenge, to keep up with the mega galleries with physical spaces in many countries and virtual spaces with elaborate tech going all over the world. I think, and just to maintain and keep our own space and Dumbo doors open. So I think that's the next challenge. In addition, every single, director that we've met here and the ones that we haven't met have led the way and added something very special to the A.I.R. community. And that's an ongoing and growing community and programming. So I'm kind of proud of the way that A.I.R. has maintained itself and it expanded through the years.
Thank you, Joan. And Kat.
I'm the last one. I wonder if we can, or if not, you can cede my time, because I know our time is getting short, and I saw an interesting question from one person in the chat that I think would open up some dialogue, and I saw Joshua had his hand up earlier, so yeah.
Sure. If Christian and Roxana, if you're fine with that, I'm happy to open up to questions, or if they're, yeah, okay.
Thank you all so much. We do have a few questions for this lovely panel today. Our first question comes from Zoom user JDBOK. I'm just locating you on the screen so that I can pass you the mic. My apologies. One moment. And you should be able to unmute now to ask that question.
Oh, hi, I'm Joyce Burstein. I had put it in the chat. I thought somebody would ask it for me, but anyway, am I right in, I thought that Ana Mendieta had been curated the first Women of Color exhibition at A.I.R. sometime really early. Am I wrong?
I think Roxana curated a whole project in relationship to that. So I think we could both speak.
Great. I'd love to hear about that.
Work.
Yeah, so Ana Mendieta, together with Kazuko Miyamoto and Serena, curated an exhibition titled Dialectics of Isolation, an exhibition of third world women artists. It happened in 1980, and it included the work of Beverly Buchanan, Howardina Pindell, sorry, I'm blanking, Julie Baca, Janet Henry, Lydia Okomura, okay, and Zarina herself was also included, and Selena Whitefeather, that's it, and Senga Ngudu, that is it. And the exhibition was a response to a series of events that were happening in New York around the time. There was the exhibition at Artist Space, the Negro drawings that generated a huge conflict around it. And also it was a response around what was happening about the environment and the response that these artists were getting in the feminist movement and A.I.R. itself. They wanted to, there's a really interesting sentence in the statement that Mendieta wrote for the exhibition, that the intention of the exhibition wasn't to change themselves. I'm paraphrasing, I'm doing a horrible paraphrasing, but the intention of the exhibition was to keep being other rather than change for the white middle class feminist movement, and for the struggles that women of color went through to be recognized rather than they need to adapt. So the exhibition was groundbreaking and acknowledged at the time, but not in the sense that it should have been probably. There were a lot of questions around it. around stylistic cohesion and or the lack of cohesion. And we did partial restaging of that show in 2018 together with my colleague and friend Patricia Hernandez. And we were honored to have the participation of the original artists. Everybody was super interested in the restaging that happened here at A.I.R. as the end of the 45th anniversary celebrations that we organized. And what was wonderful is that for the catalog of that show, Ana Kazu Pansarina requested each artist to write a statement about their work at the time. And for the restaging, we had the pleasure of receiving new statements, looking back at that show, but also about how they sort of see the art world at the time. The artists that were present wrote new statements, and those who couldn't do it either because they passed or they weren't in good health. We had also the pleasure of receiving statements either from their estates or their collaborators. So there's a lot of information about the show on our website. We can put up the link. And unfortunately, there aren't images of that original show, not a lot, only some of the works. But I guess an anecdotal thing is that because of the stature of these artists, when we were before we were installing the show, we were really afraid that we couldn't do it on time. But because the show was organized for A.I.R., by the end of the second day, we were done. It fit perfectly the space that we had.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all for answering that lovely question. And now we have a question from Joshua. Joshua, I'm going to hand you a mic now.
Good afternoon, ladies.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Brooklyn Rail. Good afternoon to everybody who attended. My question was for everybody that's on the board of the A.I.R. I was wondering if you all have considered looking into nonlinear ways of promoting the gallery space, as well as by reaching out to maybe schools or something with art programs, for their ladies. They might appreciate that. But one thing that I was going to mention, because I've spent some time in Germany, and in Germany they have walls. They have like dedicated walls or assigned walls for graffiti artists in Germany. And basically, I was attempting to get with Senator Boyle on Long Island in reaching out to other people and filling out this petition to get free walls to promote artwork and a safe haven for street artists and other artists alike. Is that something, is a petition something that you all would be interested in taking up with the city to basically in A.I.R.'s, favor to support that, the woman in artwork around the city, basically saying we're going to get free walls. You all were talking about real estate in the city, and I understand that. I'm from New York as well, Queens. I've lived in Long Island. I've done community relation projects out there, and basically, is that something that you all would be considering taking up with the city, making a petition for A.I.R. to get free walls to promote more woman artwork? Apologies if that was too long.
That was, we have done many projects, many public art projects, including at Dumbo, and in Dumbo, we have used walls. So in fact, we're very involved with the Department of Cultural Affairs. And also a lot of our artists have done like subway stations and so forth and so on. So I would say that overall, the gallery has a pretty good track record. Also working with the community. We work with shelters for women, and we also have done stuff with the public schools in our neighborhood. So Roxana could say more about this, but I think that we have been quite involved in many community activities and applying for all sorts of grants to do public artworks. Isn't that the case? Yeah. Roxana's nodding.
It is. And I guess to answer your specific questions, each project is analyzed on a case-by-case basis. And if the projects align with what the board wants to do at the moment, we definitely support them. It's just there's a protocol to accept anything that we do, but yes, we are definitely involved with many public art projects and initiatives with schools, everything that Susan said. I'm not gonna be.
Thank you all for answering. And thank you, Joshua, for your question. Next, we are going to go to a question from my colleague and hero, Malavika.
Thank you so much, Comrade Ty. And thank you all so much. It's no secret that I've been loving this conversation deeply. And I do want to say for public record that all of you were such a pleasure to work with collaboratively for Ty and myself in the back end. And I feel like it just really speaks to the magical and like collaborative pulsing energy of the gallery space, that it's so much fun to be in the Zoom with you, in an email thread with you. My question grows out of our pre-check, which I found just like so fascinating as a space I never wanted to leave. In the pre-check, many of you spoke about how A.I.R. at a macro level was a place where new genres were being innovated. So looking like kind of beyond the individual female artists and thinking about the larger, broader like earthworks, performance works, ecofeminism, these different genres and movements that now we can kind of zone out like at the macro level and see what was happening in the last 20 years of kind of contemporary art practice. And I was wondering if you, everyone in the room, if you could kind of talk a little bit, share a little bit beyond the individual artists who are so wonderful, if you could talk a little bit about kind of the aesthetic and political movements that you saw happening before you. I feel like A.I.R. maybe is like the right place to be at, to see the writing on the wall, 10 years ahead of time. And I'm kind of wondering about, the aesthetics of A.I.R., if you could talk a bit about how you've seen it develop, things you've noticed, different phases of development, and this kind of cross-pollination, because clearly there was kind of like there was an energy being shared.
Joan, do you want to take that one?
Maybe Joan can answer this question. I mean, it's a very big question. I think that one thing that's happening that we haven't really talked about is that we're redefining our mission statement. And there's a committee to redefine the mission statement and to make the membership more inclusive in terms of non-binary people, which we haven't talked about. And that the very definition of what a woman's gallery is, or even what a woman is so in flux right now that has been turned into a major preoccupation of the gallery. The other kind of handwriting on the wall is the question of diversity, and it's not just racial diversity, but it's also age diversity, and it's also what I think Maxine referred to is the fact that, Carolee Schneemann told me she couldn't join A.I.R. because she couldn't afford the $20 in 1972. And there are people now who cannot afford the dues. And really the diversity that we're aiming for or thinking about is also a class diversity, so that it's not just people who can afford the fee, and a lot of younger artists and poorer artists can't. So I think that those are kind of the issues that are kind of circling right now. And they're not that easy necessarily to figure out. I know that a lot of times on the executive committee and a lot of the members are working on these aspects of how to diversify that, you know, not just what we show, which has diversified because there's more video, there's more installation, there's more performance, there's more things that are not tangibly painting and sculpture and drawing anymore. But there were from the beginning. But also a lot of experimental media, a lot of dance. So I would say that that's where the expansion is going to happen in the future.
I think also, there's some precedent for this many years back, and the gallery first opened up their open calls to transgender artists in the early in the 2000s, and in 2007. So it's an ongoing conversation, but I think also thinking about precedent is useful. And I don't think we've talked about that as early as the mid-1970s. A.I.R. had an international exchange program, so was doing exhibitions of women artists from Japan, Israel, Poland, you know, and this has continued, though not yearly, not regularly, but it was quite early for those kinds of exchanges to occur. And I think those seeded much of what has then continued over many decades.
Yeah, and I guess one interesting aspect is like, rather than stylistic unity, similar to what I was talking about in the Dialectics of Isolation show, I would say that what's unique about A.I.R. is it's the heterogeneity of genres, of media, of discourses. There's a word that Christian here uses a lot about multivocality. Like there are so many voices in A.I.R. I'm feeling it. A.I.R. is characterized by a multiplicity of voices, and I think that's very important in every aspect, in the work, in the way we work, and how to respect that and contain it. And
yeah, and you see that in the exhibitions. I mean, we do 3 exhibitions every month for 4 weeks, and you can come in on any given month and see something entirely different, not just in terms of discipline or media, but in terms of conceptual concern or subject matter.
Thank you so much. Such an expansive answer, and giving us all the answers that we need. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. I mentioned this in the chat, but I always find it really lovely and welcoming to hear feminist organizations discuss how that mission expands to include non-binary and genderqueer folks. So it was really lovely to hear you all talk about that. And then I now myself have a question, which is that, unsurprisingly, which is that during the conversation you were saying, or you were all saying about how once you were scheduled to show, that was your show and no one could really police that and everything like that. And I think that creates some opportunities for, like, as is part of A.I.R's mission, a really diverse set of shows. And so I'm wondering if each of you could share just quickly one show or piece or performance or exhibition at A.I.R. that really stuck out to you, or that you feel particularly connected to.
Can I go?
Please.
I have one. I really love the postcard show, because the postcard show always reminds me that there are different ways of thinking about art, and it takes this one small format, and there are so many ways of looking at that structure. And so in my own artwork, I always get so locked into thinking, well, it has to be this. So to all at once see the vibrancy of that particular exhibition, I really love it.
I guess my last show happened in September 2020, and it was actually covered by the Rail, which was great. It was a cover image on the Rail, but it was actually for the April 2020 issue. But of course, the show was postponed. And the whole experience of working with Fong, who I must say, I think is an amazing person, and being interviewed with him, he came to A.I.R. and did it live and did an event in 1997. Was it? I can't even remember which year, but it was like it was right before 2017. He came to A.I.R. and I feel all along, partially because he was friendly with Nancy Spiro and Leon Golub, that he had a sense of how important the space was. And I like to think that A.I.R. and the Brooklyn Rail have a lot in common, aside from both being in Brooklyn, but also as a place for diverse, if you look through our history, you'll see how many diverse artists and artists with different perspectives and different styles and different approaches, abstract, figurative. I guess if I would say anything overall, it's the fact that it's such a polyverse and a polyglot. Maybe that doesn't sound so good, but the amount of different stylistic and approaches that people take in their shows, I find very inspiring. So each month I have no idea what to expect. And especially with the fellows whose work isn't probably being shown for the first time in a gallery space. So
I think I also similar can't pick one, but was thinking back to when 2008, when we were thinking about moving, I think each time the gallery moved, it was an opportunity to rethink what was working and what wasn't working, and rework. And that then at the same time, the opportunity to put together this show about the gallery's history. I think the part that was the most fascinating was the time I was able to spend myself and some of the other curators in the archives with Dina Muller and a lot of really wonderful folks who were interning at the gallery at the time. And we created a timeline of every postcard from every show that had ever happened. So that, not what we created, but getting the opportunity to see that. I mean, it was a history of graphic design, a history of women in New York in the arts and internationally over decades. Yeah, just that vibrant weaving picture over the years was just incredible to participate in and to view. I felt very honored.
I'm going to say, for me, Meryl Latterman-Euclides, who watched A.I.R. Steps as a performance piece. She was not a member, but part of the feminist community, was really game-changing for me about what art could be. And I'm going to go back to Nancy Spiro, because all of Nancy Spiro's work was on paper. And at that time, paper was not considered a valuable or sellable commodity in the art world. And she insisted and knew that and insisted on staying with paper. And I don't think she actually sold anything until she was close to 80 years old or was represented in any museum exhibitions. And a lot of that was because all her work was on paper. So there's another radical inspiration about the freedom that A.I.R. offers and continues to offer all of the people that are in and around the community. It still does not put any constraints on artistic innovation. And for me, that's the most important thing moving forward.
Thank you all. I have trouble keeping track of making sure that everyone got to say their favorite shows. Did we hear from
Maxine?
Well, I would say what's striking me is that something which, when we're first talking to the fellows, when they first come in, one of the things that we stress is this is an opportunity. Use it for work that that you think about and that you take risks. Take a risk. This is a safe place to take a risk, and don't play it safe. So I think that, listening to everyone talk about the early years, and So in other words, that aspect of the gallery is something that we're talking about on a regular basis as we meet, well, as we talk with one another, but also as we meet with the fellows. We do studio visits with them and have conversation.
To follow on what Maxine said, I mean, I think that's something that's very rare today. It's very rare to have a space that you can experiment in, that you can show something entirely new that you're still kind of figuring out and in the process of. I mean, when you look at the commercial landscape, for instance, especially in New York, but elsewhere, it's for MFA programs, like you have to come out with the finished product and be ready and done and, you know, ready to show. And I think that air of experimentation, of permission to take yourself where the work is taking you, is something really important to what A.I.R has done over the last 50 years and continues to do today.
I would also say it's something that's really important to me because although I enjoy interaction with commercial galleries, I prefer to be in a situation whereby it's my choice. Of course, working with the fabulous input from Roxana and Christian and Patty and various people who've been on the staff and curators at the gallery. But I think it's not all that usual that you can take risks and go out on a limb. Whereas if you're working with a commercial gallery, it's in my experience, it's much more confined. Maybe not always, but.
Thank you. Those were really lovely answers. It was really great to hear about all of these shows and just how you all measure what you're drawn to. And now we are going to go to final remarks from Fong Bui. Fong, you should be able to unmute now.
Thank you, Ty. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Maxine, Jess, Christian, Joan, well, I hope I'm not missing anybody. Of course, JoAnne and who else? I hope I covered. I missed
Roxana.
Yeah, I missed most of the conversation because I have to attend to a meeting, but I heard here and there, and I was very struck by JoAnne's remark earlier, who say that for every injustice, there's an architect that supports it, which I can't help but think of Audre Lorde's famous saying where she declared the master tools will never dismantle the master's house. You know, it's a very important thing to remember. And thank you, Susan, because I remember how I met you and mirror to Nancy, probably in 2003 or 4, because I met the Gollop in the late 90s, and then finally sent Chris Martin to interview Leon for his first retrospective, really, rather late in life, in 2001 at the Brooklyn Museum. Then eventually I interviewed Nancy for her huge show at the Reina Sofia, and that's probably 2008. But I remember clearly how previous few years when I came on Lena Lopez show and WNYC and began talking about the rail, where I failed to mention the artists who were not like visibly known at the time in the art world. I think I just mentioned, Richard Serra, Bryce Munn, and people like that. And I remember Nancy right afterward called me and yelled at me. She yelled at me, did not speak to me for 2 months. That was a very important lesson. So you never forget. To be yelled at is a very important thing. I think I know that now younger generation cannot tolerate such thing, which somehow need to be negotiated, depend how you how you mediate that. But I believe that it's important when you are wrong, when you don't do your homework and forgot where you come from, what you care about. You should be reminded. And I think that historical memory means generosity. And we need to keep that, that very intact. And it's very important. I love what you say earlier too, how our dear friend, the late Karen Schneeman couldn't afford to pay that $20 for membership. And so whatever we need to do, we have to work together. I love this African proverb that says, if you want to go, you know, you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And as a community, this whole entire pandemic in the last year and a half now have proven that the only way we can really work together that's our arsenal to thrive, you know, to exchange wisdom, knowledge, commitment, and in a very real way. It's really dig deep into the alchemy of each other's impulse and desire and ambition, really. And whatever the Rail can do, we are here welcoming any form and shape of collaboration and support A.I.R, because it's so important that we do that. So I'm and the Rail is ready. Anytime you want to meet and chat and see whether we can conspire to do great thing together in any way and shape and form. So I'm grateful to you all for coming today and share your wisdom and the whole deep history. Christian also. So thank you so much, Kat also. I don't remember. Here's Mimi Gross. Hi, Mimi. So thank you so much. Giving back to you, Ty. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Fong. Thank you for those lovely words on community. Oh, sorry. It's so lovely to hear all of these thoughts from Fong when we have such an amazing team today. And now, to further these ideas, at the Rail, we have a tradition of ending our community events with a poetry reading. And today we have the very special opportunity to hear one of our amazing guests, JoAnne McFarland, read. And JoAnne, you have the stage.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And I think that this poem kind of fits where we're ending, you know, about community and also the kind of sacredness of each voice and kind of really honoring what you have to contribute to the world. So this is the opening poem from my latest collection, Pullman. The poem is entitled Sleeper. The Pullman Car Company operated railroad cars, including sleepers, during the late 19th century through much of the 20th century. Most of the porters on the trains were African-American men. Thousands belonged to the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, founded and organized by A. Philip Randolph. It became one of the most influential labor unions of the 20th century. Sleeper. Don't break into this poem. Please just let it be. Let it arrange itself without your intervention. And if it be too neat, sit by it and breathe. Breathe as evenly as it breathes. Break into this poem and it will not vanish. It will merely sink. Just last night, my daughter Misha told me that humiliate means to sink down into the earth. A poem can die like that. I worry about her. Then I remind myself, worry is a kind of invasion, a lack of faith, a sort of mucking. And after all, didn't she arrive right when I most needed love? Don't break into this poem. Don't workshop it. Don't nick it with your history. Everything that has brought you to this point is your poem. I crouched in weeds in a vacant lot on Rosedale Avenue when I was a girl, in a still, wild part of the Bronx, past the dead end sign, before I knew what a metaphor was. Metaphors have not improved my life. I understand they may have improved yours. One day, we might gather around an oak table in an academic setting and debate the value of symbols. In dream after dream, I crouch, giddy from not searching, from knowing I am not missing. Don't change this poem. I'm trying to save somebody's life. This is how I do it. True, I'm using a tool few believe in. Where I come from, lack of belief is a sport, bitterness a performance, irony a style. I know an exquisite young woman who cries herself to sleep. She should be as unhappy as she seems. She's right. So much of the world has been ruined. She takes words apart for sport, then arranges them so they build like an orgasm. Please don't tell me how to write this. Don't show me the extra word in line 1 or how my use of the word is drags the whole poem down, evidence of my lack of proper schooling. Why doesn't anyone talk about this need to have beauty proved? I don't have to prove the worth of my words, meaning if this poem is written because I write it and no one reads it, it still has value. Please don't get a group together to discuss whether this poem is working. It's working. I started writing this poem in 1988 when my father knocked out my mother and we both shook with the blows. All I was doing was listening. He dragged himself into the distance while I remained fastened to her, keeping her from becoming a ghost. I'm writing this for all that I've lost. Honoring my life this way is inexpensive. It's refusing to grieve that has cost me. My refusal to grieve broke a man I loved. He wept for me even as I refused to weep. I thought I could get away with it, my lustrous, griefless life. I had a lot of support. Now grief fills my pages. Every poem I write is a lullaby. Once upon a time, there were men who helped other men reach their destinations. They carried their coats and cases, served them their meals and liquor, then tucked them up in their beds. This poem prepares you to let your guard down. That's its job. It treats you like a child. They treated them like children. It's a mistake to assume life moves from point A to point B, that the future will come after whatever this is, and that some are born to be carriers while others are meant to be praised. Thank you.
Sorry, now I'm supposed to talk. I'm crying. Thank you so much, JoAnne. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, this is embarrassing.
Thank you.
Okay, wow, sorry. Thank you so much, JoAnne, for that incredible reading and for, I'm reading from a script, but I'm so affected by your words. Geez, maybe Malvika, could you do this?
Yeah, of course, of course, of course. JoAnne, we loved so much that beautiful line. Some are born to be barriers, some are born to be raised. As a girl from the south side of Chicago, the metaphors of Pullman and how the train car empire like had its fist around the nation and the people is something that I think about deeply. Thank you all so much for this beautiful program. Each one of you such a blessing. We're all sitting here with bated breath. We do this program every day at 1 p.m. We will be uploading the recording to our events archive and onto YouTube if you should ever want to revisit this magical space. And please join us again tomorrow when we'll be visited by Shazia Sikandar, the wonderful artist who has a beautiful show, Extraordinary Realities, up at the Morgan Library through September 24th. She's in conversation with our art scene editor extraordinaire, Amanda Glibizi, and they'll be closed out with a poem from Sanam Sharif, beautiful Urdu English hybrid poet. That will be at 1 p.m. right here in the Zoom. Thank you all so much, and now I think we're going to toggle the security settings, invite you all to turn on your microphones if you want to say hello to each other, goodbye to each other, anything at all. But JoAnne, so glad we bullied you into reading for us. And thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you all so much. You're now able to turn
Bye, thank you, it was wonderful. Thank you, bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Muchísimas gracias.
Merci.
A.I.R. and Brooklyn Rail.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan.
Good to see you, JoAnne.
Thank you, Fang and Malika and
you.
Jessica. Thanks for being on time, for being so patient with all of us.
Thank
you. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Made my job easy.
Everyone.
Thank you, everyone.